acquiesce to injustice. Anyway, we watched this movie, which was very moving, and then the movie ended. It was a Sunday evening, and then on came the news that the marchers in Selma had been beaten. They went to cross the Pettus Bridge in Selma, and the police ran into them. They beat them with clubs. They gassed them, and they even went into their homes, and many people were injured, and it was a horrible scene. And then Martin Luther King came on the TV, and he asked people to come to Selma. They were going to try again to march on Tuesday. And he especially appealed to clergymen of all faiths to come. So we were at my friend's house, and he said, well, I'm going to go. And so I kind of said to myself, well, I'll go with you. And that's how I decided to go to Selma. And we went the next morning, was Monday morning, and we flew to Atlanta, and then some people picked us up in Atlanta and drove us to Selma. And we stayed at some residence home overnight, and Tuesday was the march. And the march on Tuesday, we thought we were going to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Tuesday. And it was a long line of people, and there were quite a few white people who had come from the north to help the blacks in this march. In fact, the way we lined up the march was that there were whites on the outside of each row, and the blacks were on the inside. So if the state troopers attacked us on Tuesday, the way they attacked the people on Sunday, they would have to beat the white people as well as the black. In any case, we got to the bridge, and the policeman said we could not cross it. And Martin Luther King said, all right, we'll pray here and go back. And there were many people in the line who didn't want to stop because they said they shouldn't stop. They wanted to march to Montgomery, which was about 50 miles away. And so Martin Luther King kneeled down and prayed for a few minutes and then turned around, and the people followed him back to the Selma. We met in a church in Selma. So that was the story. That was the second march, which I attended, and the third march was about 10 days later, and by that time there was a court ruling that allowed them to march, and they marched. I didn't go on the third march, but they marched all the way to Montgomery.
Okay, and then just how did you feel when you were there marching with them at Selma?
Well, it was a little scary. There was a clergyman from Boston who was beaten by some hooligans. I don't know who beat him, but somebody beat him with some iron bars or something, and he got killed. So it was dangerous. But we felt we were doing the right thing to support this march for voting rights, and we did it.
Okay, and then, how does it feel to have contributed to that event and to have helped that cause?
Well, looking back on it 50 years ago, I feel proud that I was part of it. I feel that everybody has the right to vote, and they shouldn't be denied it because of their skin color or any other reason. There's still today the fight for voting rights. There's probably that there's been attempts and in fact rules changed to require ID cards to make it harder for people who don't have driver's licenses to vote. They've also restricted the days of voting. There used to be 2 weeks in advance that you could vote, and some of those have been pulled to vote today.
Okay, and so, like, since you did that, and, like, would you consider yourself a civil rights activist or not?
Well, I was a civil rights activist 50 years ago, yes, and I lived near Chicago, so I went on many marches. I marched for civil rights and for against discrimination against blacks. I also was on many marches against the Vietnam War over the years, and now in recent times against the Iraq War. But nowadays I'm 85 years old, so I'm not so active anymore.
Okay. Okay, so how do you think that the civil rights movement impacted American society? I know that's kind of a big question, but...
How is it? Would you repeat that question, please?
How do you think the civil rights movement has impacted American society?
Well, I think it has. There was a march yesterday that was led by President Obama, and they said the same message that the activists have been saying over the years, that people should have the right to vote and it shouldn't be restricted. There have been very few attempts to falsely vote, to vote twice or to vote when you didn't have the right to. That's been practically negligible. So the attempts to restrict voting is not in accordance with the American tradition of giving every person an equal vote.